back to edit it. Yeah. Right, there we go.
Fabulous. Hey. Fabulous. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Friday bite-sized webinars. Familiar faces, myself, Will Murphy, Carl Horton, and I'm absolutely thrilled to say that we've been joined by Nyree Whitley. Thank you so much, Nyree.
Pleasure. Hello.
It's lovely to see you again. As always, all we're going to do is have a little chat of the past week, see how things went, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, Will, how's your first week of 5 days?
Yes, full 5 days. So I'm exhausted. It's almost like everything was a dream. And, you know, the whole last 3 months have just been sort of wiped out for, you know, if anybody remembers Dallas from like the 80s where a whole series was wiped out by somebody returning, you know. So
brilliant.
Yeah, I've had my Dallas moment, but you know, very quickly you just get used to being back in the surgery. Obviously, there's logistical things which I guess we'll delve into a little bit later. But yeah, good. Pretty good, busy, a lot of things to catch up on, a lot of patients, very grateful to be able to see somebody at last, and, you know, good for us to be able to try and sort out any problems. So, yeah, good, very positive first 5 days.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Great. Carl, what about yourself?
I don't work as hard as Will. So,
oh, well, we know that, but just flag it.
But yeah, back in again on Monday in a local practice where they've sort of mitigated for their fallow time. So there was fans whirring away, filters on, and which was great. So again, it's learning all the SOPs for that particular practice and learning how they work. And then again today, placing, which is great. So you should be happy there, Will.
Yep.
Getting some titanium in some mouths.
Excellent.
And consults. And again, slightly different setup with the way that they were greeting their patients and the processes that they're going through, because every practice is slightly different. But we don't work in as many as Nyree has to look after. And with this one, the great thing is that out the window, the patient actually sits on a bench by the church, so you can shake down to, you know, Mr. B, we're ready for you, and instead of having to text.
Not the graveyard, I hope.
No, that's the exit.
So Carl, would
you holy water on the way in?
Carl, would you say with the amount of practices we work in, I know that obviously we're slowly getting back into them. Would you say, if the challenge is the right word, but would you say the biggest challenge for us is learning the new SOPs per practice? Yeah,
because they're all different in their own ways. The key thing is they're all triaging and triaging the patients well. And doing that, the subtle differences are just very minor. Mm-hmm. So it's all very similar. So it's understanding how they're going to manage their fallow times, the timings on that, what their process is for their protocol for the patients, whether they're going to allow them into whether the large waiting room to have more than one patient, or whether we're texting, how we deal with the little things on the intricacies of, are we allowed to stay in the room? Do we need to leave the room? Whether we're in another room? All those little tiny little things. Just each one is just very, very different. Very slight.
You use the phrase mitigation there. Talk to me about mitigation and what that means.
Well, it means that in the one practice, what they'd done is they had calculated the airflow through that room per hour, and then realized that they could manage a certain amount of air exchanges and therefore reduce their fallow time, or the time that all those delightful aerosols were removed from the room, so it was safe to get the next person in without them being potentially infected. Like, can I go into what I'd normally go into, or can I just stay?
That'll do. That's fine. That's fine. I'm just interested in it in that mitigation's becoming a thing, isn't it? That we dentists are very good at not making up, should I say, but we're just kind of, in the absence of any real science, especially in terms of the F word, we're looking for ways of turning our surgeries around a lot quicker, aren't we? Which I guess Nyree would be very interested in, and probably able to talk to us about how that works in a larger situation where efficiency is going to be everything, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's one of the key things that we've been looking at. Clearly, one of the first things was to try and get patients in, but now it's actually about how can we improve patient flow to start off with in the practice. So, how can we actually get people through the door safely? And that's even before you start to look at the time per appointment, and then the time to clean down, and then the time that you've got to take to do all the triage and things of patients, in addition to actually seeing them. With regard to mitigation, as far as the F word is concerned, we've actually had some work done this week. We're working in conjunction with the National Physical Laboratory, with the government. So we've had a practice that has been doing AGPs, where we have had various different monitors within the room, actually recording how much aerosol is generated per different procedure, the amount of time it takes for the procedure, how quickly does it take to clear that aerosol, what difference does it make when you are using that high volume aspiration and the rubber dam. So we are hoping to get some early results on that in the next couple of weeks, and then that will be actual evidence based. There's a thing, hey?
And is that, are you using these virus killers and this sort of stuff?
No.
Or like me,
we're opening our windows, and
I was going to say
high volume aspiration and rubber dam.
I've acquired one of those wall aperture air exchange systems, like yourself, which I think works pretty well.
Very cost effective.
Yes, absolutely.
It will be. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because we're all expecting and waiting for the work to come out, the review that was allegedly done by various people, both medical and dental, to actually have a look at, can they review the 60-minute fallow time? But the problem is, what evidence can they review? Because there is nothing out there at the moment. There's work being done by Newcastle Barts, a lot of those, but a lot of that has been done on mannequins. So actually to date, within a dental environment, there is no evidence base for them to either base the 60-minute on or to reduce it currently, which is why we took matters into our own hands, and we'll happily publish the results when we have them.
Fantastic. I think that's good, and I think it shows that, and we've hit upon this before, that in the absence of some leadership, and I'm not pointing the finger, anymore, because obviously we've done a lot of that, but in the absence of leadership, I think the profession's done pretty well at taking its own leadership, and I think has done it really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Will. Obviously, you've all heard what I think.
Carl is talking to me. You'll need to let me know, as I can't hear anything he's saying.
Okay. Can everybody else hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
But not you, Nyree.
No. Nyree, you can hear myself and Will?
Yeah, just not Carl.
That's all right then.
Do you know what?
Don't worry about it.
Maybe I subliminally.
He's got nothing to say.
Yeah, it's not worth it anyway.
It's moan, groan.
Yeah, I'm used to it.
Nyree, with you being, and it's up to you if you want to say who, but with a large corporate, what would you say your biggest challenge has been within the corporate field?
With regard to Restart?
Yeah.
Okay. Happy to say that I'm the Group Clinical Director for IDH, and that encompasses both DD and my dentist. So really happy to say that. Our biggest challenge has been fit testing.
Okay.
Absolutely, undoubtedly. I was saying to Carl just offline before, to try and fit test over 6,000 people has been some challenge when we've got, lots of different face shapes, lots of different, we cover all the different principalities, and it has been, tough. That's been the toughest bit. And then the other bit is actually just, I think I've heard it discussed on lots of other webinars, but I think clinicians and our staff have got so used to following SOPs, etc., and effectively having prescriptive instructions, it is now giving them the confidence to actually just look at their own environments, look at their own practice, look at the anatomy, look at the demographics of the patients, look at, their existing lists that they've got to come back in, and just to start making some decisions themselves. And actually, I think the profession now really lacks confidence around that.
Yeah. I think that would probably go with a lot of practices, to be honest. They have been looking for guidance and very nervous, unfortunately.
Nyree, what autonomy do the practices have, like a smaller practice, say like I own, where we've had to very quickly shuffle around our schedule so that one dentist effectively has 2 surgeries to work in, so we can kind of leave fallow and go back in for checkup somewhere else, and so my associate has effectively dropped the day where we would clash together, and then is extending her days on the other 2 days that she's in.
So we had some overarching kind of guidelines to try and support the practices when they first went back. So, for example, we were saying that in their practices, initially, did they need to start with any more than 2 surgeries open, whilst they just got used to actually how do we do things in the new normal. Then what we've looked at is which clinicians are available to work in the practices. So which, for example, may be shielding and vulnerable, which have been successfully fit tested and which haven't. Who usually does what proportion of work, how many days and hours do they do, what's their list of emergencies like in order to come in. And then so the practices have had all of the autonomy to make all of those decisions locally. We've just given them the framework around, this is the patient flow, you can take the temperature, have a runner, to meet them at the door, take them to the surgery, do the cleaning. But with regard to, and we did advise initially 60 minutes per appointment. Now we've very much said, particularly our ortho guys, very quickly, where there's no way we need 60 minutes. And it's like, it's fine. If you're comfortable and if you can do it safely and appropriately, absolutely reduce the time and you make those decisions locally.
Yeah, and certain procedures as well. I mean, for me, and I don't know about you, Carl, I kind of feel that a lot of implant surgery really, in my book, isn't really like an aerosol generating procedure.
I'm struggling. I've seen it in some of the SOPs regarded as an aerosol generating procedure, but I'm trying to figure out where the aerosol is generated. It's generated in the sweat of the the gowns and the respirating masks, but the actual procedure itself, I splatter maybe, but
absolutely
not an aerosol, and splatter at a very, you'd be unlucky. You probably didn't put your scalpel in the right place.
Yeah, and presumably scatter's not going to be wafting around the surgery for an hour.
Well, in my mind, that's pretty much the same as hand scaling. If anything, you're flicking bits of calculus and which contains blood and saliva out of the patient's mouth potentially when you're hand scaling. So I find that definition interesting.
And normally we're part of our infection control procedures is treating every patient like they might have a bloodborne virus, should we say? We're pretty good at our infection control measures anyway, aren't we, within these sorts of procedures?
Yeah, very, very, very much so. We're used to sweltering in surgery with all the PPE on, and so it's like, what? Get over it, And thankfully, like Nyree mentioned, we had a quick chat. You can have your aircon on if you feel comfortable. Or if you feel uncomfortable enough. I don't know which way you
either.
But I do kind of feel quite comfy with it being regarding it as a non-aerosol procedure.
Okay.
But that's my personal view. Can you hear me, by the way, Nyree, or am I just opening my mouth and
you still can't hear Carl, Nyree?
She just thinks you're clearing the runway for takeoff, getting the planes lined up.
Will, I asked you a couple of weeks ago, and it was too soon really to comment. We're another couple of weeks on from asking, but have you altered many of your processes since returning back to work?
Not really, no. I think we're still trying to get used to the sort of first set that we've introduced, really. So it's deciding what's an AGP, where we're going to do it, what time that starts, and then what time we go back in again in order to sort of clear things up. I think initially we've cleared in our minds anyway the point we've just made about surgery and implant surgery being non-AGP, which in many ways makes life, a lot easier for someone like myself. And it's really then just trying to organise the diary and the book so that the staff are getting used to zoning the patients in the right way, and understanding that you can't really squeeze the extra patients in anymore, and you can't really put AGPs together. There's got to be some period of time to go between, and actually, to be fair, I think they've done that pretty well, certainly in my surgery. So I think we're still finding our way with the original SOP that we've got, bearing in mind that obviously it is going to be fairly fluid and change as we go through, and of course then we're watching to see what everybody else is doing, like everybody else is watching everybody else to see what everybody else is doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so.
I think I answered the question.
You did. What, all three of you individually, really, but what do you foresee on the horizon? What changes do you think we're going to encounter, if any, over the next 2 weeks? In England, maybe not in Wales.
Go on, Nyree.
We're all expecting another letter of preparedness, aren't we, at the moment? Who knows whether it will be here? It's usually always on a Friday. They arrive Friday evenings, usually when it arrives in my inbox and things. It probably will be next week now, I guess. I think that's probably going to be more around, I'd have thought that's going to be more tailored to around payment and things like that. So it'll be more relevant to the NHS guys from that perspective, and looking at, how are they going to monitor activity in any kind of way going forward, considering that they're going to carry on giving payments, certainly in the short term. I don't think an awful lot in terms of direction from above is going to change. I think they're just going to talk about that transition to recovery and are pretty much leaving it to practices. Whether we'll see any changes around UDCs, we've got 74 UDCs at the moment in England. So at the moment, they are trying to carry on seeing the emergency patients that are also being referred from other practices, in addition to trying to do the startup themselves. And I think there will come a point where that becomes more and more challenging because of wanting to start to see their own patients again. So whether they will give any more direction around that, possibly.
Guys, what about yourselves?
Over the next 2 weeks? Yeah, I mean...
14 days.
Fortnight. We don't talk about
fortnight.
So yeah, I mean, that letter's interesting. I wonder now whether or not, based on the fact that we're all kind of finding our feet, whether if it brings that fallow time, whether those people that are sticking to that rigid 60 minutes might have a bit more confidence. And you mentioned about the lack of confidence, and is it a lack of confidence or is it fear? And us, maybe the two go together. I don't really know, but is there a fear that you're going to be brought to task by a regulator that's not happy with it if a patient kicks off or gets ill? It's an interesting one, and hopefully, as that confidence grows over the next few weeks, we'll see more and more practices getting back into it and starting to be comfortable treating the patients that that patient journey starts to flow a little bit smoother as the staff get on board and understand it. And you know, if everything starts to go the way it has been, then those sort of mitigating circumstances become less and less important as the disease declines in the population. Looking at those R numbers, and they continue dropping. Depends on whether it's a sunny day and we all want to go to the beach, or what happens, whether we all go down to the pub and start coughing on each other and eating the peanuts again. They don't do peanuts day anymore, do they? You're not allowed to do that anymore.
Aerials.
Yeah. So yeah, and you know, hopefully we won't see a bounce back or anything like that. I mean, the good thing, and I mentioned this last week, was Jason Wong and his sort of views on helping the profession out, and again providing that sort of guidance to the dental practices in Leicester, saying you don't have to shut, you can carry on treating your patients, because we know where we are with things, we know what we're going to do, we know how to move through this pandemic, and so that closure, as I understand it, isn't going to happen again. It won't be that dental practices are told to close. It will just be that they might be advised that there are certain circumstances, I imagine, where they restrict certain procedures, again, like we already are with certain practices where they're not offering the AGPs because they either haven't got the kit, and like Nyree mentioned, the struggling to get the fit testers or the practice and the teams fit tested and passing. They got to pass. But as I mentioned last week, it doesn't actually say anywhere you have to pass, as far as I'm concerned. So you need to fit test. but don't mention that.
Nyree will start sweating. Stop it.
Yeah. So
sorry, go
does
on.
that answer your question? I've waffled as always.
You never waffle, never. Well, what about yourself? I mean, similar to Nyree and Carl?
I think within 2 weeks, maybe not a lot will change. I think with pressure from the profession as we move forward, I think the fallow time will go down, or we'll all carry on coming up with our inventive ways of mitigating, Carl, the fallow period. Unless, of course, like you say, you know, there are spikes that crop up. So, I mean, that's all unforeseen, isn't it? You know, just depends, like you say, how rowdy the pubs are getting, or you know, I think ultimately I think very positively in a good place, because we're triaging our patients. We are probably more than likely treating healthy and well patients, and covering all bases, really. I think the fear factor is a really important thing, because the fear factor runs through British dentistry these days, doesn't it? You know, mainly, like you say, about getting brought to task or getting in trouble or some form of litigation. And I guess it's all untested, isn't it? It may be things that we're talking about in our little webinars to come. So there's the unknown without the crystal ball. But I think in 2 weeks it'll probably be largely more of the same.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think you're right. Have anybody else got anything they want to bring to the table on this fine Friday evening?
I want to know when Nyree's can give us an idea of when that research will be released, because I love that kind of stuff. I'm really keen on.
Well, this week was when we were doing it all this week, so it should have finished. It's been the 5 days. So being in a surgery, they have said they'll probably need a week or two just to kind of, review and assimilate and collate all of the results and come up with some kind of conclusion. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, and hopefully I won't keep saying and another week and another week. Hopefully we will give you it in a couple of weeks.
And did you do it? It's okay if you can't. I'm just curious. Did you do it on sort of like particle counters and sort of like what were you actually measuring? I know you're measuring the aerosols. But did you do it through like a visual way, or did you do it or both? Or
particle well, a number of different things. So particle counters. There was one relatively inexpensive one just to try and see how effective they were. Then there was one kind of, industrial laboratory type one that cost an absolute fortune. And then additionally, everything was videoed as well, but not with, the blue light or anything like that, but all the procedures videoed in order that we knew exactly what procedure was being done, how long each one was, and what exactly was used in terms of, clearly they made a note as well, but at which point of the procedure and at which time, things like high volume aspiration and rubber jam were used. So hoping to get some pretty good results. They may have, I don't know whether they had an opportunity towards the latter part of this week. We do have some air filtration units that we've put in our surgeries that don't have windows. The particular surgery this work was being done in clearly was one that had a window and the window was open, but they may, if they had time, have looked at switching on one of those to see whether it made any additional difference in terms of, the particles and things that were in the air. But I don't know whether they had an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I was talking to one chap and he was doing it right next to where he was breathing in and near the patient, and using high volume suction and air extraction and getting very little difference on aerosol generated procedures compared to background. But then he tried one with the window open, the window closed, and the particle counts went up when he opened the window from all the crud. Yeah. Sorry.
Can't have your windows open.
That'll be the next thing.
That's only carbon monoxide. That's okay.
Yeah, only a little bit, but it was only by one. So it must have, maybe the patient parked or something like that. I don't know.
Keeping it real. Keeping it real.
These things we'll be measuring next. Maybe not.
Let's hope not, hey?
I'm a bit out of touch on Scotland and Wales at the moment. Are they still lagging behind in terms of the face-to-face or the AGPs?
So Wales, yes and no. So as long as you have had your SOPs and your fit tests all signed off by the local health board, which is the equivalent of the area teams in Wales, and HIW, which is the equivalent of the CQC in Wales, then you are able to do AGPs. And those things can run parallel or run separately, because sometimes HIW have a quicker turnaround than the LHB, sometimes the other way around. So effectively, we're open in the same way as England, but the process is just taking slightly longer. In Scotland, clearly we were just down to seeing 10 patients a day, still seeing emergencies only. It's still no AGPs. Phase 3 was announced last night by Nicola Sturgeon. That starts from Monday, but there is still no new SDR out in Scotland. That comes out on Monday, and it is still no AGPs. So it's barely going to be any different in their phase 3. It's their phase 4, which is August time, where it's going to be looking at actually being able to do AGP.
And by then, all dental practices might be out of business. So
yeah,
might all be academic.
Yeah.
Terrible.
You also had to get permission from the NHS to be able to open a surgery to do private in Scotland as well, in a mixed practice.
Okay, yeah, because I was interested in that, whether traditionally the CDOs have just been pointing at NHS surgeries, haven't they? And the privates are kind of like, nobody knows. So
from that perspective in Wales, I have to say, Colette's been very good. She's always just said, well, as long as you're happy with the guidance that's given from the perspective of the NHS, but it's just always been, the same applies to private. If a patient was seen privately before, they should still continue to be seen privately. And HIW are working in alignment with the health boards to allow people to do things at the same time. So there's a bit more clarity than there was in England initially.
Good.
Yeah, slightly different government guidelines as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So you've got to work with those as well, which has not helped, has it really? Yeah. And it's difficult sometimes.
Then we've got Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Which is different again.
Yeah, it's difficult to kind of get our heads around that. We've all been, Will and I have been kind of debating it
impolitely and aggressively, in our own cantankerous way.
I mean, one thing that you haven't mentioned, Ari, is something that I noticed really early on with my dentist when I was not doing very much. I was really impressed with my dentist and the way they manage things. I've got to say, I'm not saying that because you're here. I really was. It was you're sort of like opening up and talking to the profession with the webinars that you did. I must admit, I didn't see every one of them, but I saw some of them. And the way you opened up your clinical online portal, I can't remember the name of it. Sorry.
Oh, the LMS.
Yeah, you opened that up, I think, didn't you, to everybody?
Yeah, we did.
I must admit, I've managed to finish all of my GDC requirements within the first 3 hours. No, sorry. Within the first couple of weeks or months. So yeah, that was great that you did that. It gave me something to do while I sat in bed coughing.
Good.
So yeah, well done with that. I think that was very good.
We just tried to just communicate all the way through and just be open and honest, because this was new for everybody.
Yeah.
We were trying to do the best for everybody, just always had the best interest of everybody at heart. You know what? We didn't always know all the answers, and sometimes we changed our minds, because that's what happened, didn't it? You know, there was new stuff coming out every day, but I hope at least people say that we carried on talking to them and also gave them an ability, always a two-way communication, you know, to have questions back. I hope so. If we achieved that, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, you did, because I logged into a couple of the sessions regarding the practices that I work in, and you know, as Will sort of mentioned, you know, I'm kind of sort of an outlier in terms of the general dentist, but they were able to kind of have that sort of one-to-one chat, and you know, say what they thought, and get an appropriate response, or maybe an inappropriate response. So, yeah. Get the response they deserved.
Risky.
Yeah. Well, no, it doesn't matter. I'm shut up now.
Yeah, that's why we have a mute button really on Carl's screen, Nyree. Will and I
hear him now.
Will and I every now and again just go.
Yeah, that can all be taken out. Yeah.
I thought I've been quite good today.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, yeah.
I've been trying to control the dog. That's what I'm moving my arm in case it wouldn't.
I was hoping that the dog was next to you, I must admit.
Well, it decided to go nuts the other day during a webinar, because it barks at beards. Doesn't like beards.
Yeah.
So it barks at usually just men that it doesn't like, but it also barks at anybody that walks across the road. So it sits in the window and just goes nuts. That's why I wear these.
It's trying to warn you about beards and FP3 masks. That's what it's doing. It's saying you should be clean shaven. You'll never pass your fit test.
You tell them. Well, you tell them.
We can get you a TheraBand.
Brilliant.
Put across it.
Yeah.
Fine.
Nice.
You don't sweat at all.
Or we could just get some wax, you know.
Oh.
Well, guys, we've reached that time of the evening. If there's nothing else, then no. I'd like to say a very big thank you to each and every one of you on the panel for joining us. Nyree, honestly, it was a pleasure to have you on the panel. I hope you may consider coming and joining us on a Friday evening again.
Of course. Thank you for the invite.
And no problem.
Thank you.
Guys, hope you all have an absolutely lovely weekend. Enjoy some sunshine while it's here.
You too all.
Yeah. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
guys.